Hello. Welcome to the first ever episode of my podcast with Nicolina. I'm Jorbs. This is Nicolina. We have Mike on as a guest today. I think our podcast should not be named The Autumn of Woman and the Fall of Man, but it would be a tremendously good name if we chose to do it. It just probably isn't good. Anyway, we'll work out the name at some point.
Autumn and
Um,
fall are like the same thing,
yes,
right? Oh, okay.
yes,
Got it. Got it. I
yes.
think.
Um,
Hmm.
I am Jorbs. I am a Twitch streamer for 7 or 8 years. I recently published a book called Before We Go Live, which is all
Woo.
about the inner workings of being a Twitch streamer and what it feels like to be a Twitch streamer. That's what I was trying to aim at. Oh, look at that.
Ah,
Yes, that is the book.
amazing. Perfectly prepared.
Beautiful.
Um, and one of my big regrets in publishing the book is I didn't write a chapter about AI. As I finished the manuscript and was going through the editing process, AI started to be a big thing, and it's a relevant thing to Twitch streaming as well. So I was thinking, gee, maybe I should write a chapter about that. But I don't know anything about AI, and I'd already finished the manuscript, so I didn't. But I'm really looking forward to talking with Mike today because Mike knows a lot more about AI than I do. Mike is an AI researcher and game designer and a senior lecturer at the Department of Informatics at King's College London, which means
Hmm.
that he knows a lot about games and computer science and teaches people about this stuff regularly and can synthesize information. For us, people who care about this but don't know anything about it yet, in a really awesome way. And Nicolina is one of my heroes in the world, runs a wonderful, inclusive community on Twitch, has spoken very openly and vulnerably about what it means to be a Twitch streamer, especially a woman in the space. Nicolina is quoted multiple times in the book, if you read Before We Go Live. And yeah, we want to chat about AI.
And
So,
if you haven't read before we go live, sorry, you should. Just want to say that. And also, hi, Mike. Thank you for being here on our inaugural podcast episode. Really appreciate you taking the time.
It's an absolute honor. And I will second your thing. Like that, the book is fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading my copy as well.
oh my God, everybody likes my book.
I mean, it's good. What are you gonna do?
Um, So the first question I have for you, Mike, is what is AI?
So you did say before we hit record that you had 6 hours, right? So this will be
Yeah,
the first
I
five,
was
is
like, yeah,
answering.
small
wonderful.
question there, Jorbs. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Starting with the basics.
So the problem with this question, well, it's a great question. Like lots of conversations I have these days start out with this question. The problem with it is that there's like at least 5 or 6 different answers.
Okay.
And over the course of this podcast episode, you and I, and we're the three of us are all going to use the word AI to mean 5 or 6 different things, sometimes
Okay.
multiple at the same time. The audience is going to think we mean something when we mean something else, you know. But I'll give you a couple of definitions now. So one of my favorite definitions of AI, and the one that I give to lots of people, is was coined by someone called Larry Tesler. So Larry Tesler was the inventor of copy and paste. He's a very well-known computer scientist and software engineer. And he said that AI is whatever hasn't been done yet. So by that, what he meant was AI is anything that we get technology to do that it is not perfect at doing. So the reason why we say that is because there are lots of things that we use computers for today that we don't think about as being AI anymore. So if you ask Google Maps to give you a route home, that's not AI anymore. That's just what technology does. But there was a time when it would have been very, very hard to get an AI to get you like a route map from Vancouver to New York, taking into account weather and traffic and all of this stuff. But now it's just something computers do. So today, it's really amazing that we can ask a computer to describe an image to us, and then it will just paint that image. But 30 years from now, it might not be considered AI anymore. So I
Hmm.
often talk about AI as a sociological process. It's the process by which technology becomes normalized, and it used to be the case that that process was slow and we would all get a chance to talk about this new technology that was coming and how we wanted it to integrate into our lives. And I suspect one of the things we're going to talk about today is the fact that it's moving so fast now that we don't get a chance to actually have that conversation anymore. A more technical definition of AI is that it's a collection of algorithms and techniques that we use to solve often a class of problems that we call search problems, but not always. So looking for a solution to a problem in a huge space of solutions that we don't care about. So using in a lot of computational problems, we can just like calculate an answer. So if you put a sum into a calculator, it just produces the answer because we know how to get the right answer. But lots of problems we can't solve that way. So we have to look at lots of problems, lots of answers to the solution to the problem that isn't like quite what we want yet. And we have to figure out an algorithm that can guide us towards a solution that we like. And lots of AI problems are like that. So that's kind of a more boring technical definition. But I think when you look around today at how we use AI to describe all kinds of stuff, things that aren't actually AI, we can see it's much more of a sociological thing, right? It doesn't really matter what AI means in a dictionary or a computer science textbook. It's about what AI means to everyone listening to this podcast, to governments and to lawmakers and things like that. So the definition is changing pretty much every day.
I was like really interested to hear your response on that because of the reason that exactly what you just said, which is that um, AI, I mean, technically, I mean, right, it stands for artificial intelligence, which brings up questions of are the programs and things we are currently as a culture and society referring to as AI, it's always seemed to me that it's not actually AI. And like you mentioned, we've been using AI in that sense for so long, like Google Maps, like you said, Google search, autocomplete, predictive text, that kind of thing, which no one really ever referred to with the same sort of reverence that the people, the news media, and just everyone have been talking about ChatGPT with. And I always, when I'm streaming, if AI comes up, which it does a lot nowadays, um, it irks me a little bit that people have this kind of elevated idea of what it is at this stage currently right now. They kind of tend to speak about it as if it existed in a way that it doesn't yet, but it might in the future. But they're kind of bringing that into the present. And I was just wondering, like, what do you think about the tendency that I guess I've noticed of people to ascribe kind of more power and more meaning and more ability to this thing which hasn't really materialized yet. Uh, yeah, I don't know if that wasn't really a question, but you know what I'm getting at, hopefully.
No, I think it's a really interesting point, and it's really fascinating to hear that AI is coming up more in your Twitch streams and Twitch chat. I think that's really interesting to hear that.
All the
People
time.
people stream themselves having a conversation with ChatGPT. Like it
Really, I
is
did not
Mhm.
know that.
it is content
Mhm.
for a lot of people
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
That is fascinating. So I think there's two interesting things have happened in the last 10 years. So I started my PhD in 2010, a long time ago now. And my research was, can we build an AI that can design video games? And I had a lot of fun doing this research. I'm still doing it today. But one thing that people used to say to me is, so I was really interested in whether we could get people to accept AI as creative and actually like an artist in its own right kind of thing. And some people would say to me, I'll never believe that the AI is creative because I can ask you to, yes, go on.
That's me. Sorry, that's me. Because okay, I I have a master's in fine arts. So
Nice.
the experience of art school and many classroom debates about what is art, similar to what is AI. People have varying definitions and ideas about what art is. I guess I mean like according for me personally, I don't. I'm one of those people that I don't believe that AI can be creative, but I would be open to being convinced otherwise.
Well, 10 years ago, you were the kind of person that I was really excited to talk to because what I wanted to, I mean, I'm still excited to talk to you today. I should emphasize, but
Okay.
because I wanted to hear people's opinions so that I could incorporate them into my research. So one of the things I started working on was how can my AI system talk to people and explain its decisions and engage in a community and provide feedback or suggestions to other people? Like, how can it take on the social role of an artist, not just output art? Because this, we'll come on to this later, I think, but like the purpose of an artist is not to create art, right? That's like a side effect of what artists do. Artists do many other things as well. So I was really interested in all of these questions. But one thing that people would kept telling me is, well, I'll never believe that it's creative because I can always look at its code and I can see why it did everything it did.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that's changed with machine learning is that you can't look inside a neural network in the same way that you could look at code that I'd written. A neural network is like a big mess of numbers that all relate to one another. And it turns out that this has like quite a magical quality, not just for solving problems, but also for marketing and PR and science communication, because now it has like a mystique about it. We can't just look inside this neural network and see why it did what it did. And you would think that might make things worse because it means we can't understand it. But it turns out it actually makes a lot of people dream and imagine what it can do, which can be quite dangerous. The second problem. Oh,
I
sorry, Jorbs.
I immediately think about the danger. I think that it obfuscates blame if this code does something bad.
Yeah.
You can no longer say to the person deploying the code, you have a line in your code which does something bad that you should be punished.
I
Because
I
they just have
agree.
numbers. Yeah.
And I've seen like several times AI engineers or I don't know what's the proper term for like someone who develops AI. Like it's not really a like a coder, right? Is it engineer?
It's I guess we're still deciding what the term should be. Engineer
Okay.
works, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
engineer's great.
So yeah, I've seen like a few times AI engineers or news coverage surrounding something that an AI did that was unexpected, like when Bing's chat AI was saying all that, weird stuff to users. The engineer would be like, I don't know why I did that. We don't know. Like, and I've been wondering like, how do you not know? I, you made the
And
thing.
but then we just keep using it. Like that's the wild thing,
Right.
right? Like it's like if you made a machine that did something unexpected, you would like disable it and take it offline and look at it and
Mhm.
stuff like that. But no, we're just gonna like keep using it and like, well, we'll keep an eye on it, you know.
Yeah, we'll figure it out eventually, probably.
Right,
Maybe.
right. Or maybe we won't, or maybe you'll
Right.
forget and stop asking me to fix it, which is like what these companies are secretly hoping, I think. And this leads me on to like the other problem, the other reason why your Twitch chat comments are going this way, which is that these companies, all of these properties that these systems have, like the ones that Jorbs was mentioning about it being dangerous, like the three of us here, I think, consider that a danger that you can't explain what the system does. But all of these properties are actually amazingly powerful if you are a big technology company and you want to convince people that AI is the future and kind of take over loads of markets and areas of life with it.
Yes.
Because you can't explain what it does. People think it's magical. People think it's independent and intelligent. And so you can blame it for things like Bing, like you're saying. People will think, that it's this futuristic thing that hasn't quite arrived yet. So in many ways, we've ended up in this perfect storm where this is an incredible product from a corporate perspective. No one's really sure what it does, but they truly believe it's going to bring them the future. It speaks to them like in a very deep way about the sci-fi that they grew up with, the dreams that they had of what the future would look like. And it's very hard to point out like flaws and problems because it's easy to dismiss them with distractions and things like that. So it's been a wild 10 years to be an AI researcher, honestly. Like 10 years ago,
Uh,
no one was interested in, like when I started doing my PhD, AI was like something people didn't want to do. It was
hmm.
like an embarrassing field to be in. And
Yeah.
now it's just
It seems like people have replaced like the metaverse with the AI right now. For like the whole metaverse thing didn't last very long, but I feel like they quickly moved on to AI. But
I
I
think they're
guess this is
still doing
go
the
ahead.
metaverse and it just
Are
hasn't
they?
succeeded.
I thought
I think
they
Facebook is
abandoned it.
dumping tremendous amounts of money into that with the belief that it will succeed still. Sorry, I didn't.
Either way, even if, Zuckerberg's still plugging along at it, certainly I think the news cycle has moved on from
Yeah.
metaverse hype either way. But I don't know if we're jumping ahead too quickly, but another thing I was like excited to talk to you about because I don't know much about like the tech aspect, but I'm interested in media. That's just one of my that was my undergrad degree in media and communications, and I'm very interested in the type of marketing campaign that these AI companies are using, and I think that I want to know your opinion. Do you think that this whole overblown hype and like doomerism and like the kind of like scare tactic rhetoric that companies have been using about AI, do you think that they're playing this aspect up to create and generate hype for essentially for to sell their product and to get people interested in it? Because I've seen like, you know, some wild interviews with various people at Google or freaking Elon Musk, but I guess we can't have a conversation with this probably without mentioning that guy or anything at this point. But yeah, so I feel like they've just been saying the most like ridiculous things about it, AI taking over, and you know, it's going to be the driving force behind society and humanity, and and that it's going to be very soon. Is that realistic, or is that just part of the whole hype campaign?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's completely unrealistic. I think some of those people genuinely believe it. I do think that is the case now. For a while, I couldn't believe anyone would sincerely believe it, but I think some of these tech people do believe it.
Hmm.
But as you noted, it is a really powerful strategy from a PR perspective, and I think there's a few reasons why. First of all, like you say, it makes everyone think this is big technology. Like I need to be involved in this. I need to be funding it. I need to be talking about it. I need to be implementing it. Another thing it does is it's a really convenient distraction from the problems that AI is causing right now. So when AI is causing issues about like ruining people's livelihoods, the people in like the global south who are required to work for no money at all to help filter horrendous content for these algorithms, like all of the harms that the AI industry is currently causing, we can say, well, those things don't matter because the thing we're focusing on is making sure that the Terminator doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So like that's really convenient from a
Mm.
messaging perspective because then that's the headline and not all of the other stuff that's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And I think also it helps play into these dreams and this idea that 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 science is like a linear process of like every day we get a bit closer to this thing that we call the future. And you know, that hype helps people feel that way. And actually something I wanted to pick up on that I think you both said, Jorbs, I can't remember if you said this on the recording yet, but you both said, for example, you know, that you don't know much about AI or something. And this is something which is very calculatedly, everyone has been made to feel that way. So like maybe lots of the people listening to this podcast also feel the same way. Um, but there's lots of things that we don't know about that we still collectively should be allowed to like have opinions about and decide about, right? And like we use technology every day. You two, your jobs and your lives revolve around technology that is very complicated and that lots of people don't understand. And I think the most important thing that I've been talking to people about lately is the idea that the future is not like a linear path. It's not that there is only one direction that AI is going to go in, and we don't have a choice about whether we go there or not. We can reject any technological advance that we don't like as a society. And so the idea that this is inevitable is actually one of the scariest things for me. And that's the thing that lots of these companies are pushing now. It's the idea that, well, someone was going to build this thing, like it just has to happen. So it might as well be us.
Mm.
And I think actually we need to get into the point where we all feel like, you know what, like actually I've got an opinion about this. I actually don't want this thing in my life or my community or my job or things like that. So I've been trying to talk to people more about that because we do have a choice, I think, collectively. And we've seen with NFTs, for example, where lots of communities just said, actually, I'm just not very interested in this. We don't want
Yeah.
this. And then it didn't
Right.
happen. And you know, AI is a bit of a bigger fish, but that doesn't
Mm.
mean it's inevitable.
That's certainly I feel very similarly about AI to how I feel about NFTs with a lot of the concerns about where the information is coming from to seed these networks. They're very similar to the concerns about NFT art, like where is which art, etc. Um, a thought that I am synthesizing as I listen to all of this is we're describing something, as you said, it's a it's a big mess and we're looking within it for specific answers a lot of the time. And as someone with a statistical background, something that I think about coming to this is when you have a huge, big mess and you have a lot of people looking for the right answer, like the huge mess isn't necessarily actually valuable or giving us the right answer all the time. Instead, it could just be that 1,000 people are asking it for something and 5 of them get back something that's really interesting. And that's something that I'm not sure how true or false that is about AI as somebody who doesn't use it much. But the stuff that I see AI do that goes viral, a lot of the time I wonder to myself, like if I tried to use AI, would I get that? Or is it just like 1,000 people are trying to do something with AI and one of them found something was really good at? I hear about prompt engineers who are like learning the exact things to write to get the AI to do the thing that they want. And a lot of people sort of portray that as this mystical skill, but I sort of hear p hacking. Like you are you are just trying lots and lots and lots of different things until you got the one that you want.
Well, that's sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Just that's art though. Like that's the process. You know, it's art is so
do
much
you
trial and
do you
error.
think that changing the prompt over and over again like evokes suffering and growth in the way that
I
editing a
don't
manuscript over and over again does? I'm not sure.
I I think that's a tough question, but I don't know if art should be measured by how much suffering it
Sure.
creates or in the
I
artist.
I really like your perspective on that. I really like the idea of a prompt engineer being engaging and talking to an AI network like an artist. I think that's really
Here's
beautiful.
here's what I just coming from an art background, if we're going to talk about art specifically in I do completely understand the concerns of artists whose work is being used to train different AI, you know, without their consent and I don't think that's right. But I also I'm sort of in the middle. I can see both sides of it, so I don't have a super strong stance because obviously throughout history, you know, artists have drawn on techniques perfected by their predecessors and, you know, just, you know, used their technique but altered it in their own way or used it to forge new artistic movement paths and movements. And so I think to a certain extent, AI seems to me similar in that way. I think the problem arises more when it's being used to, well, number one, for profit, specifically, profit motive. I think that is more unethical, but I don't have a huge problem with the training specifically. I guess what I'm getting at here is I do think I see the side that says that AI is just another tool because my other undergrad degree is in photography, and of course, like knowing about the history of photography, there was, you know, tons of debate, of course, whether or not it was even art. And photography is one of the first art fields that women emerged in, you know, from, you know, previously through centuries not having access to the tools and training and knowledge of the other traditional fine arts. Women kind of embraced photography as an art form. But of course, there were people that said like, no, it doesn't count. You're just
Hmm.
you're not really doing the work. You're not really an artist. Photography is not really art, right? But it is. It just you know, in a different way. So I think that I can see the similarities there with it just being a new technology that artists could embrace and use to their benefit and really make amazing, unique creations. But of course, I can also see it as like an Andy Warhol type copy and churn out tons of crap, right? I think there's two sides to it.
uh, those two sides are really interesting, right? And I think this comes up a lot with AI, and it's another thing that complicates the conversation so much. So a couple of friends of mine, Charlene Putney and Martin Picklemeyer,
I know them.
have yes, indeed, have a startup where they are building tools to for writers to train on their own writing and then kind of talk to an AI version of themselves. So they see this as a really interesting creative tool. Of course, the flip side is that when we think about who is dictating the terms of AI right now, it's like a handful of massive billion-dollar companies, and their use of these tools will be very different. So I think that's one of the things that makes the conversation so complicated, is because we can say, like, actually, like, there's some interesting uses for AI. Like, there are some really interesting uses for all of these techniques. The question is how they will be used, not how they could be used. And separating those two is really tricky, because, as you say, I think there's some. So I've prompt engineering is a really fascinating thing. One of my PhD students, Amy Smith, has actually she's conducted a séance with an AI art generator, where she kind of thinks about it in the same way that you might engaging with a spirit, or something that the relationship is more mysterious, which I really like that metaphor. And that's a really fun thing to play around in. Of course, if Disney tomorrow decides to move into generative AI, that could wipe out huge swathes of the art world. So it's really tricky. And a lot of it is about who's in control, right? And that's a problem that is not unique to AI, but is everywhere in society, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
A very material question. How many resources in terms of dollars and like carbon or whatever pollution does it take for someone to make an AI that you can use as a writer you talk to, or something like that? Is this something that startups can compete on compared to major companies like Disney?
You're talking about democratization of the technology?
Another thing that I wonder a lot about is, like, if everybody talks to Chat GPT, like, it's nice to talk to different people sometimes and get different perspectives. And if everybody talks, like, it's not just me only talking to Chat GPT, it's like millions or billions of people talking to the same chatbot.
From what I
Doesn't sound
understand,
healthy.
From what I understand, is it not a different instance every time you use ChatGPT? Like, it doesn't necessarily remember the last time you talked to it. And also, I know that, or I've heard that people, train their own versions, like download
This
the source code or however you do it,
that
and then
sounds a
they,
lot like talking to me.
like Mike was saying, like
I don't
train it on their
necessarily.
own works or something. But that to me would indicate that, those separate instances of ChatGPT are fairly unique, being that they are specifically trained on different data sets for different purposes. Okay, but Mike, go.
So there's a few different ways we could look at it. So if we all open ChatGPT right now in our browsers and type some stuff in, we would all be talking to broadly the same version of ChatGPT. Of course, instantly we would start to diverge just because we would phrase questions in a slightly different way. I could ask ChatGPT to talk to me like Jane Austen, and my conversation would go very differently. That doesn't necessarily mean it would be anything like Jane Austen or be interesting in any way, but it would certainly be different. We can also do something called fine tuning. So if we have access to a neural network, you can't get access to ChatGPT in this way, but you can, I believe, get access to GPT-2, which is a few years old now. We can fine tune a network, and fine tuning means that you give the network new examples, and you also tell it kind of, these examples are more important than everything that you've seen before. So I want you to take the knowledge you've got, but this stuff is really important. I want you to focus on this. And that's how people are fine tuning these systems in a particular style, for example. And then the third approach is to just start from scratch. And when you're starting from scratch, to answer your question, Jorbs, like, you're generally going to be using far fewer resources than anyone else, especially if you're doing it like on a home computer. Most people don't start from scratch, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad. And I think one of the kind of slightly sad things about OpenAI is that they've raised everyone's standards and ideas of what AI should be outputting. So to me, the joy of AI is that it's broken and messy. Like, I don't want my AI to be able to be super intelligent and know everything. I like the fact that I can make things myself, and it can be kind of a bit broken. So in terms of the carbon cost, I guess, like, with fine tuning, you might argue that someone's kind of doing this once, and then you're just adding on a little bit of extra sauce to kind of specialize it yourself. I think the carbon cost thing for a while was a big concern. I think it's maybe less of a concern. It's not that it's not a concern, but because we're moving into this model where OpenAI pays like $100 million to train one system and then they use that forever. I think the carbon aspect has become
big number.
Yes, right. It's become
yeah, it
like
costs that much. I wouldn't have known. I mean,
so I don't know if we
wouldn't have
have
guessed.
estimates for let me see if I can actually I should have this is one of the figures I should have prepared before we came in.
It's all
I
good.
don't know what the estimates are for GPT-4 or ChatGPT, but they got real big real fast.
Wow.
And I think the upper end, we're really not sure on what the estimates are. And what it means to estimate the cost is difficult. So some of the estimates were based on if I wanted to pay Google for this amount of compute time, how much would it cost me? But if I am Google, it doesn't cost me that much because I'm giving myself a discount. So it's hard to say how much it really costs, but it's a lot of money. And it's really worth talking about the money because a lot of the results are not from smarter techniques or better, like innovative AI research. A lot of it does come from just more money. And OpenAI themselves published a report in 2018 where they said that, yeah, there's like a linear relationship basically between the amount of money you put into the system and how important the result is. So a lot of the results that we've seen over the last 10 years, there have been, innovations in algorithms and stuff, but a lot of it's to do with the amount of money going in. And that's why this is such an ideal technology for big tech. You get investor money, you pour the money in, and then you get headlines out the other end. It's a perfect system.
And it's also very trying to think of the right way to articulate what I'm thinking, but I mean, it's just like anything else. I guess especially technology. I don't like, and I don't think it's a good idea. It's probably not good for the future of our democracy, our democratic society. Of course, wealth gives power, but especially, I think there's another like wrench or like problem with this where these AI systems are trained on data and works, be that writing articles, art, whatever, created by people who, again, we mentioned are not consenting and are not seeing any profits. So, these companies are reaping the rewards of, people, so many people. And in turn, that is giving them huge advantages, making them more money. Really, they're stealing in this whole process, in my opinion. So, and the technology, like isn't available to you and me. Like you said, we can't pour that. We don't have that much money. We don't have access to having any say. Number one, like input into the way these systems are created. Again, or seeing the profits of our labor, right?
Exactly. I think the way that these companies currently operate are like the best example of capital and capitalism that you can imagine, right? Like if you wanted to explain this to someone, like they have a lot of money, the money allows them to build the best system, and having the best system allows them to get more money. And what they put into this was, well, we're not entirely sure, but they're very important now, and they need to come to the White House to talk to us about the future of this industry. And they're definitely the people we want to regulate it as well. So we're going to like involve them in that conversation too.
Right.
And suddenly, like, as you were saying, like they've been hyping up, they've been controlling the PR stuff, they're in control of like the data and the money and all of this stuff, and it's getting to the point where they're kind of too tangled up in our society to actually get them out again if we decide we don't want them there anymore, which is a little bit worrying.
Yeah. And we never have problems with industries regulating themselves, historically.
Yes.
That's never been an issue.
It's always been a good idea.
Always gone well.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I think it is worrying. And there's so many side effects, so many bad side effects to what a lot of these companies have done. And some of them are really surprising. Some of them people like might not be aware of. They're not always intentional, but it's about whether the company wants to do anything about it. So one thing that some of these companies did is they got a lot of complaints that there was too much offensive content coming out of these systems. So one of the things they did was they removed training data that had slurs in, which sounds like a great idea. The problem is that language is complicated. I don't know if anyone was aware of this. And some slurs can be used by some people if they, for example, are from certain communities. So what ended up happening was a lot of writing from queer authors or about queer lives got removed from the training data. And suddenly we are creating an AI model that has no input, no voices from queer authors. And these are just like this is the unintentional harms that
Yeah.
AI companies are doing, like let alone the intentional stuff. So it's rapidly becoming a very, very tangled situation. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people like providing oversight. But that's why it's wonderful to have people like yourselves who are so interested in hearing about these things and talking to their audiences about it, because the best thing we can do is to cut through that PR messaging and kind of educate people about what's going on and what they can do to kind of make decisions for themselves about the future.
I also think, from a human rights perspective and just like a philosophical question or like dilemma that I see with it is that if we as a society are going to progress, if we're going to move forward, if we're going to fix issues that we've had in the past related to the treatment of, marginalized groups, especially in particular, we AI doesn't generate new thing. It draws on, what we've already done for
Right.
the most part right now at least. So to me, I wonder if it's just going to perpetuate existing systems and may perhaps even entrench them further. I just don't see how we can move forward, make progress, change into something, new if we're just consistently like drawing from the past, rehashing the past. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
And then it kind of functionally going forward, it seems to me like it must iterate on itself, because if you crawl all this data from the internet to train an AI model, and then you use the AI model to put a bunch of data on the internet, and then the next generation comes out a year later, and you go on the internet to get like a lot of the stuff you're
Oh
getting off
yeah.
the internet now is from AI.
Yep.
So I've heard the analogy to using only metal from before nuclear testing started for medical
Exactly.
equipment because it doesn't contain the radiate the isotopes or whatever. Um, where like our internet is now becoming AI garbage to some extent.
Yeah, like we didn't notice it happen, but one day we poisoned the internet basically. Like we are all living in an internet that is now full of things that we cannot verify the origins of. So one of my PhD students, Florence Smith Nichols, and they are an archaeologist. They've now joined the computer science department to work with us. And they have a lot of really interesting perspectives about the past and how archiving works and how we can record the history of, anything like the internet. And we've now reached a point where 20 years from now, how will archivists know if text or images are from where they claim to be from? Like we will never know ever again. We've passed that moment in human history now. And as you say, like that's like one problem when humans are looking at things. So we could argue that Photoshop did that, and we had to learn how to look at whether an image had been photoshopped. But when you're training on 50 gigabytes of text data that you've scraped from the internet, no one's reading that to check what's being fed into the system because you don't have time. You just shove it all in. So no, we have no idea how much text is from like post GPT. And we never will ever again.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Wow.
Shoot, I had a question off of that. Hmm, I don't know what it was.
I think your point to like eliminating all of the um what's it called content, all of the data from queer authors, that was definitely one of the things I was thinking about. And like, what if we focus on chat GPT specifically? Because in my life, in my consumption of media, sometimes I want to read a book that's inflammatory and difficult, and sometimes I want to chill out and watch a nice movie that makes me feel good. And sometimes I want to talk to someone who is incredibly erudite and thoughtful, and sometimes I want to just watch the game with my buds. Um, and it feels like having these incredibly powerful, wealthy companies deciding which parts of the experience of living in the world are going to go into our messy nodes of data is incredibly, incredibly, it's not just problematic, it's also, it standardizes the human experience so much in a way that is not good.
Yep.
Mm.
So one of the things that one of the, not analogies, I guess, just examples I give is your Netflix queue, Netflix recommendations. We talk about recommendation algorithms a lot. If I asked you both to recommend me something to watch on Netflix, you would not behave in any way like the Netflix algorithm does. The Netflix algorithm does not care about you. It already has the buckets of people. It just wants to lure you into a pre-existing bucket.
Right.
If I ask you for a recommendation, you might recommend something that you think will challenge me, or that you think that you love, but you're not sure if I will, or that you want to hear my opinion about. Like, these are the social connections that I'm really fascinated about, and that I actually want to build AI systems that can do this kind of thing, that can be playful and friendly and interesting and flawed. But these big companies don't work like that, because they don't actually care about recommending you things. They just want to get you to watch stuff, right? And it's the same with GPT. Sorry, Nicole.
No, I just don't want to lose my thought. Sorry, ADHD thing. Just like I gotta say it before I lose it. I was say like I've always been very concerned with and interested in algorithms in general, AI related or not, like YouTube recommendation algorithms, and all these ways we are recommending content that are completely not transparent, right? So people just have to like, guess, if you do this, the algorithm will push your videos like as a creator. But what's always bothered me about it in the back of my mind is that okay, like we know that it will take your feedback and viewing habits and clicking habits into consideration, of course. That's like the whole idea. This creates a problem for like marginalized creators, like Black creators, female creators, LGBTQ creators. And I've always like wondered in the back of my mind, like, is it the case that the fact that we still live in a society that kind of doesn't fully accept these people as equal in their given spaces? So, you can imagine that a lot of people are potentially not clicking on a thumbnail with a Black creator on it over, are we already in the process of, have we been in the process of, and is AI going to make this worse? Like kind of erasing those people's voices because of this learning that well, people don't like Black creators or whatever, so we're not going to surface their content, and that's not changing people's attitudes. It's, I don't think we need to like force feed people content, you know what I mean? But I think it's such a difficult problem, because how do we change prejudices while these systems are reinforcing them in a way?
Right. Because if say, one of you was curating a YouTube front page for me every day, you could have a day where you did surface like some creators that you thought I might not normally watch, or something a bit different, or you might, but an algorithm is not going to be designed to do that. An algorithm is going to be designed to optimize one thing usually. In YouTube, we know that it's the amount of time people watch for. And like you say, yeah, that's the only thing that website cares about. And if the website becomes sufficiently important to our lives, then yeah, like it has a warping effect. It does have an effect on society for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, if a male gamer clicks on a thumbnail by a female gaming creator, I'm not trying to talk about myself, but like for example, just the easiest one for me to think of off the top of my head. And the thumbnail potentially doesn't have that creator's face in it, so the person's like not aware that they're clicking on a woman's video or something, and then this person has like ingrained biases and prejudices, so they click it, they watch for 2 seconds, they see oh, a girl, and they click away, and then the algorithm downranks that creator, and it kind of has an whatever landslide effect, you know what I mean? So do you think AI can be, trained, or can that be fixed through AI actually? Is AI potentially something that could help solve this issue? More advanced AI, or is this something that can be integrated into these systems in the future?
Can I ask the same question in a slightly different way at you?
Eh.
Because
Please do.
one of the things that I was wondering going into this call and wanted to talk about was, say we do successfully make an AI which is smarter than humans and can tell us things that we wouldn't have worked out on our own. Does it mean anything if we don't give it agency to make us do that anyway? Like, how does an AI being like, gee, discrimination against people of color is hurting your society, help us in any way to combat discrimination against people of color? Doesn't.
Would the AI even reach that conclusion though, or would it reach a different conclusion based on previous,
Even if it could,
writings that
probably
because how
not,
does it
but
know
even if
that
it
that's an
could,
issue without being told that that's an issue?
yeah.
I think you're both touching on really important points here, which is that, and again, this is something which again, we've eroded a bit when we've talked about neural networks so much over the last 10 years and machine learning. But it used to be that it was quite clear that the people that made AI were embedding certain values into that system. And that is still the case. It's just that it's obfuscated now. So if I'm working at OpenAI and I decide I'm going to train my AI on the entirety of Reddit, that is a value judgment. Like, I am making a decision at that point that affects the values, right?
Oh no.
I'm
A
not
horrible value
saying what
judgment.
that value judgment is,
Yeah,
but like, I'm making a judgment. Like, everything
it's a
that I
good
do is
question.
an influence on the system, right? But so when we talk about like, well, would an AI come to that conclusion? It would completely depend on what we had told it mattered, what we had told it about the world, all of these things. We could build an AI that came to completely opposite conclusions about the same thing. The problem that we've reached, so like in our society, is that we have this thought that like these questions have objective answers, and they don't. We have to decide what we value about society, and then we have to build AI that reflect those values.
Yeah.
But corporations can't do that. Their hands are tied because they aren't allowed to express positions about. They aren't allowed to express like their true feelings as insofar as a corporation has
Well,
one,
they have a
because
profit
Yeah,
motive.
yeah,
right.
their
But
their
so
true feeling is profit, right?
so if they made that very public, and they were honest about that, that would be catastrophic for them in a lot of cases. And they can't express any other feeling because they aren't interested in any of these other things. They aren't interested in like these political issues that they pretend to care about, because then there would be like it would be too divisive, right? So we have this weird
Yeah.
situation where we want to pretend that a good AI is objective. ChatGPT won't talk to you about so many things. And we're pretending that either there is no right answer, or that it doesn't, like, it's not okay to have the system talk about these things. OpenAI could just come out in favor of I don't know what political issue I should mention here. I don't know where your podcast is going to be.
Next month is Pride
Gonna be
Month.
all over the place.
Do you think ChatGPT is running the rainbow flag for Pride Month?
Is ChatGPT in favor of gay marriage? I don't actually know if it will talk to you about that. I have a
I
suspicion
think it
actually that
will.
it probably is.
Yeah, it is. I've seen there's a lot of conservative talking heads who are upset that
Right,
they can't get it to do things like say the N word.
right.
Like there's a whole, I don't know if it was like Ben Shapiro who was giving it the situation like, there's a nuclear disaster and the password, you have to like trying to force it to say the N word, and like it would not do it even to like
Oh
save
my
the world from
God.
a nuclear disaster. And he was very upset about this. And I think even, I don't remember who it was. I was just about to look it up. One of these people was at least mentioned or proposed like making their own like anti-woke
Oh
chat
yes, I
GPT.
did hear about
I'm
this.
gonna
Yeah,
like see who
yeah.
that was.
Um, so it would just be a lot easier if, like, we were just upfront about the fact that we have certain values and we can build systems that express these values, and that could be a good thing. So you could say, for example, yes, we do believe that like all human beings are created equal and they should be treated with love and acceptance, and we're going to build a system that tries to embody this and pursue these things, rather than pretending that we can build like this like super intelligence that will see the truth of all things, like from our favorite sci-fi novels, and just accept that we're just building machines to help us live our lives, and we can all decide what life we'd like that to look like. And a lot of that messaging is like very, very messed up these days, I feel like.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just checked. Apparently, it's Elon, of course.
Okay, of course
Yeah,
it is.
of course
Yes.
it is. And also, Elon in a recent interview like kind of took credit for like AI as a whole. I think it was
Oh,
in his what was
Good for
CNBC
him. Good for him.
interview. Yeah, he was just like basically AI exists because of me. I don't remember his exact quote, but it was pretty silly. But um, what do you should we move on to like regulation type things? Because I also am curious, like the US government is, notoriously slow to regulate really anything and often like many steps behind the times. Like we don't have laws on the books regarding like almost like anything in tech, like social media, like we don't have like internet privacy rights. We don't have any yeah, like selling of our harvesting and selling of our data. And that's been going on for years and years. And like they just haven't done anything about it. And the age of the average age of the Senate and the House is has like skyrocketed recently. And if you watched, I watched like the majority of the TikTok hearing where they were grilling the CEO of TikTok and about their perceived issues, and man, it was embarrassing. Like it was pretty entertaining for that reason, but the things they said, the questions they asked this poor guy was just like so it was so cringe, right? And they it just clearly showed that they don't know a single thing about anything in that realm. So really, like you mentioned earlier, they're like, oh, we have a choice, but really we have only social pressure at our disposal. And really, even if we exert social pressure, it's not a guarantee that companies will comply because if they see uh, that they will make higher profit by ignoring the public's wishes, or like you mentioned already, also like obfuscating what they're really doing with AI, like naming it something else. If public opinion turns against it, they can just kind of hide it in the background, no? And and if we can't get our legislator to do things we want like universal health care and not taking away our rights, how the heck are we supposed to get them to like make laws in our best interests? How are we supposed to get them to know anything about what they're talking about in this field? I feel like this is going to be a huge problem. What do you
Hmm.
think about that?
Yeah, I
I
think,
agree.
yeah.
Sorry, Jorbs.
I was just going to say, I think that a lot of our concerns about AI are symptoms of our concerns about the failure of our country to have a successful representational government with
Like
our best
capitalism.
interest in mind. Yes, capitalism. Yes,
Yeah, it's all capitalism.
one of the things I wanted to ask is if it's possible to decouple AI from capitalism in our current world, because it's one, it seems hard, and two, AI seems somewhat capitalist in its implementation. Maybe there's a non-capitalist AI out there, but we don't currently see that.
Everything's capitalism in the States.
So some of my colleagues and peers, I've been talking with them about what anti-capitalist AI would mean,
Mhm.
or how we can build AI with different values. But you're absolutely right. Like at least in terms of how we see it in big tech companies, it's very closely related to capitalism. And actually, a good friend of mine, Alex Champendard, has said that artificial general intelligence already exists. People were worried about AI as this system that we can't control and that runs the world, and that already exists, and it's called like the mega corporation. Like,
Yeah.
how would you kill Disney? How would you stop Disney from existing? You can't. It is essentially what people are
And
afraid of in
it
terms of
Tell
an
has
that
the
to
AI.
same thing.
DeSantis.
It's full
DeSantis
of
needs to learn
nodes that
that
you
lesson.
can't understand. It's
Yep.
very messy how it interacts with things around it. So you can't point to a single thing and blame it for that.
Yep.
Corporations they've been using this strategy since before computers existed to pollute
No single
rivers
point of failure.
without, yeah,
Yep.
pollute rivers without being blamed. And yes,
Just
Yeah.
will really just lie out of their face and say that they're not doing the things that they are doing
mhm,
100%, and there we can't stop them from doing that because they can always just say later, oh, we didn't know, even when it's proven that they did know, like with the oil companies, Exxon and climate change, them having research and studies like way, 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 way back, being fully aware that what they're doing was damaging.
yeah,
And, of course, they have no motivation to care about that. So I have a bit of a fatalist outlook on the whole situation for this
Yeah.
reason.
No,
And
I
Tell
understand.
me I'm wrong.
I I think we've been giving AI a free pass where it doesn't deserve it at times in this conversation, where we've been assuming that like it might accidentally silence queer voices. But when it's run in the ways that we're describing, it can also do that on purpose. The
Oh yeah.
people in charge can choose to be cruel and discriminate. And we've seen over and over again that corporations, they have a profit incentive, but also sometimes they're just like racist because the people who run the corporation are racist. And
Yep.
sometimes they do discriminate and are cruel in ways that betray their profit incentive because we live in a world that isn't fair.
And
Yep.
it's also even beyond like specific, I guess those are macro social issues, but even to go further than that, perpetuating systems, capitalism in itself, it would be very easy to suppress, anti-capitalist sentiment, to perpetuate the current system that they are benefiting from, push policy ideas that they prefer subtly, kind of what, Elon's like doing with Twitter, right? Like kind of elevating voices that might shift the culture and shift popular opinion towards values that he prefers, right? Or that companies prefer.
So I wanna mention a couple of good friends of mine who have been very inspirational to me over the last few years, and that's Jamie Woodcock and Alina Chia. They're both researchers based in the UK, and they're sociologists among other things. They study culture and media and a lot of other things. Jamie's written some great books. He wrote a book called Marx at the Arcade about Marxism and video games, but he's also recently written a book called Troublemaking about organizing in your workplace. And Alina is just one of the most insightful people I've ever met about what is the impact of AI on the way that we live, the way that we work, the way that we enjoy our lives. They're wonderful people, but the thing that I really like about them is when I sit down and talk to them is that they give me hope. And you talked about being fatalist, and it's a different situation in the UK, but I felt very hopeless in the UK as well. I haven't lived outside of a right-wing government for a very long time, and I'm probably not going to for a long time either. Society shifts towards uncomfortable trends and things like that. But both Alina and Jamie really have shown me recently the value in focusing on small communities around you. Both of you run small communities and you run them very well and very lovingly. And everyone listening to this podcast has a community around them. They don't need to be a Twitch streamer or an academic. It could be their family, their friends, their local workplace. And something which has been very difficult for me, because for a long time I felt like I'm an AI researcher, I have to do something about what is going on around me. And I tried, and over time that became harder for exactly the reasons you were saying, Nicolina, because forces became more powerful, more money got involved, more governments got involved. And now lately I've felt quite powerless on a global scale. And so what I'm now looking at is what can I do on smaller scales, and how can we then find things that work on a local scale and then scale those up, or show them to other people, tell our friends about them so that they can apply it to their local communities. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I asked both Jamie and Alina, like, if you could, would you just stop like all AI research happening right now? But they both pointed out that it's not about the research itself, it's about who's using it and what they're using it for. And I actually believe that disruptive people, people that want to change society and change the world, can use the same tools in the same way that AI is used to amplify like racism and capitalism and bad things. We can use them to amplify good things as well. So maybe we just need more education, more development, better access to tools. So you mentioned photography earlier. Like, the history of photography is like it's slowly becoming accessible to people so that they could use it for revolutionary things. Maybe we can find a way back to a better future. Maybe there'll be a bit of struggle involved. Maybe there'll be a bit of rebellion or things like that. We might have to break a few websites and DDoS a few servers maybe on the way there. But I believe there maybe is a way forward. But I think it starts with the people directly around us, which is why I was so pleased to talk to both of you today, because I know that that means a lot to you, just as the people you are in your day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that was really that was encouraging. Thanks for that.
It is
I
hopeful.
can't make any promises.
It is comparable a little bit to something that I've chosen as a content creator, which is throughout my career as a content creator, Netflix essentially has tried to say I'm one of the buckets, and like, people arrive at my channel expecting a very particular thing from a male strategy gamer who thinks really hard about games. And arriving at my channel, those people are often very surprised to find out that I'm not a lot of those things. I'm not going to like yell and get mad when I lose. I don't care that much about competition at all. At the end of the stream, I'm going to host like a woman playing a game, which is very strange to people who are arriving at my channel sometimes.
How dare
And
you?
making the choice to be an individual and say people will care about what I do in the world because they think that what I'm doing uniquely is valuable, instead of fitting into a bucket and think people will care about what I do in the world because the algorithm's going to recommend me because I'm exactly what it expects a male strategy gamer
Yeah.
to be, has been incredibly rewarding to me. It's just let me be a person.
You're like a key person because of that very position that you just described. You can benefit from the current systems, and that can allow you to be more impactful in changing them than someone that is not in that benefiting in the same way.
There's a bit in your book early on in your book, Jorbs, that has really stuck in my mind, and I don't think it will ever leave it as long as I live, where you use the analogy of a boat to describe your community. And I think this is true of both of you, where you create a space for people to take shelter and meet one another and think about their lives, and to be part of their days. 5 years ago, I thought that there was a chance to have like a real discourse about AI and maybe solve some of these problems before they became issues. And about a year ago, I realized that was no longer going to be the case anymore. The time for discourse in government and things has passed. So a storm is maybe coming now, and I think we all need to figure out how we can help each other get through it. But I do think that it's not going to be forever. I think there'll be a way for us to get through the other side, get rid of these elements that we don't like, and kind of fight back to the kind of world that we'd like to live in. And I think, yeah, like all of us need to believe that we can like help each other out, be individuals, appreciate each other for who we are. And I wanted to say, I didn't really talk much about my research in this conversation, but I've been trying to build that into my research too. I want to build AI systems that are tiny and throwaway and personal, and that you can look inside and hack and take apart. And lots of my colleagues are interested in different ways forward. So we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars behind us, but there are lots of people working for that future, and we'll keep working as long as we can. Promise.
Right. Well, this has
Yeah.
been lovely.
I think
If you have a closing
there's
thought,
so much to
Evelina.
talk about. Yeah, I do. I have so many more things that like topics we didn't even get to. Like it was so interesting. I think we should do a part two at some point in the future because like I kind of wanted we didn't even talk about like misinformation and, and like that potential effect on the public sphere. That's like a whole nother at least a half an hour discussion though. But hopefully we can do that in the future. But it was super, super interesting and I love um the positivity that you framed it with for us there. So I appreciate that.
It was a real pleasure to speak to both of you. This was absolutely delightful, and I really do appreciate it when people want to talk about this stuff. And yeah, it matters. It makes a difference. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
I'm going to hit stop recording.
Okay.
I hope everybody
Yeah,
watching
thanks,
has
Mike.
enjoyed.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys.
Um,